Hey, welcome to the Devy to Dynasty YouTube channel. I am your host, Brandon Lejeune, host of the Devy Deep Dive podcast and creator of the Devy Dashboard. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm here back again, frequent visitor to the channel, Corey Para. How are you doing, Corey?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Excited to tell some people about some guys they might have to sell this year before their value plummets anymore.
Oh yeah, well that's going to be our goal anyway, right? So Corey and I, we put out a little while ago our buy show, so be sure to check that out. And again, this is our second year doing this show together. We had a good time last year, so I invited you back. Let's do it again. I'm sure we'll do it many, many times in the future. But before we get started, I just want to mention about the Devy Summit. It's a big event that I'm hosting with the Campus to Canton crowd, which Corey's a part of, and Matt Hicks over at the Rookie Big Board. We're doing a huge Devy and C2C event on May 22nd in the afternoon. It's going to be a 6-hour live feed with a lot of great guests, and it's all fundraising for the poor people that are suffering in the Ukraine region right now with the war going on. So be sure to mark your calendar. It'll be a live feed on this YouTube channel, so please subscribe and hit that subscribe button, and you will get notified when that show happens. So the big question is, Corey, why don't you explain to the people like what we're looking at when we talk about a sell, right? I mean, what are we looking for? Why would we, these players that we're going to talk about, why are we going to sell them right now?
So there's two type of guys that maybe you might want to sell, right? So in my opinion, it's a guy who's maybe already dropped a little bit, who's holding a little bit of value, maybe like a DJU or something like that, that maybe you want to get out on before it might plummet anymore. Or it's guys that are being valued too highly right now for what they bring. Guys that you should maybe consider while they're at this peak value, you should sell in case they drop, or reasons that we might think they might drop throughout the year. So
yeah, I mean, as we talked about on the buy show too, I mean, this is a Devy is a value game, right? I mean, you want to play the value, whether it's up or down, and it's a disappointing game, right? I mean, every year we are 2 weeks before the draft, and we're talking about guys that we thought were going to hit to the NFL, that the NFL community doesn't look at it the same way us in the dynasty and fantasy community are. So, right. So there's never a wrong time to possibly sell a player that might be getting overhyped, as Corey said. I mean, the Twitter echo chamber is real. That'll prop up people. So, these are 6 guys that we're going to talk about tonight that, we feel are overvalued. I'm going to kick the show off, Corey. I'm going to talk about a player that has been super productive last year, and he's going into his junior year. That's Devon ACHANE, 5'9", 185-pound running back from Texas A&M. And my concern about him is really just right off the bat is the size, right? This is a Devy sell show, right? So what is ACHANE's role going to be in the NFL? That's what I'm asking myself. At 5'9", 185 pounds, I'm not sure what kind of role he has. Now I'm doing a Devy mock draft. I've done 2 or 3 in the last 2 weeks to prepare really for this show. I mean, he's still getting drafted in the early 5th and 6th rounds of C2C startups, right? And for me personally, I think that's just a little too high. In 2021, he had 130 attempts for 910 yards, averaged 7 yards a carry. Back in 2020, he averaged 8.5 yards a carry, right? For the box score scouts out there, the guys that are looking at these, numbers, they're thinking, wow, look at this, look at the average, right? In receiving, he actually increased his receiving this year for 24. So his value, I think, is brought by his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He was certainly productive last year running in between the tackles, almost ran for 1,000 yards and 7, like I said, averaging 7 yards a carry. And that's great in college, but I'm thinking to myself, what exactly is that role going to look like when he goes to the NFL? So what's his opportunity this year, right? I think he's possibly going to be the lead back, right? So his value, I think, is going to stay high, because you're going to hear his name a ton running in between the tackles, right? LJ Johnson's been banged up this spring. He hasn't really played at all. We're all very anxious to see him. I've got many shares. I'm sure Corey does as well. Amari Daniels is another running back who I don't really think is a threat to, a lot to get a lot of the carries. Le'Veon Moss is an incoming freshman, but probably won't see the field most likely, if I had to guess. So ACHANE is going to get an enormous amount of carries. He's going to flash. He's going to have all this production. But in the bottom line for me is size matters for running backs. And like I said, I don't know what this guy's role is going to be. So seeing him going in the 7th, 8th, and 9th rounds of C2C startups, I think people are drafting him for his college production and his ability to put points on the college side of your C2C teams, which is fantastic. He's going to be great for that. He's going to get the ball. He's going to be a PPR machine. But this time next year, you're going to be holding on to an asset that may not really translate to the NFL. So I'm suggesting that you move off of him now and maybe give up some of those points if in fact you're trying to build your NFL squad for your Devy teams. So I know that he's got a lot of value out there for some owners. I'm just not one of those people. I'd be looking to sell ACHANE right now before this time next year, when he's not really discussed at all, even being used in the NFL.
Yeah, and I really do like that call too. The thing with the size too is, like, he's a track star, takes it very seriously. I don't think this is a guy you're going to see be bulking up through the rest of the season. And your best bet might actually be to sell in season somewhere at the midway point, when he's putting up those points and guys want to get production, or sorry, that's, you do see that where they want to get production, or when he's putting up that production and at least dazzling everybody's eyes to want to get him. But similar kind of thing with my guy where I'm going, maybe a little bit better size, but I'm heading over to Michigan, and I'm going to talk about Blake Corum, the guy that you like, running back there, heading into his third year. Now, I will say Blake is an interesting case because, like ACHANE, sorry, he does have some really nice moments. This is kind of less of an indictment on him as a player and more somewhat to a historical trends in the NFL. And I mean, that starts with size. I mean, at 5'8", 200 pounds, it's not a terrible size because he's short, he's stout. I think his BMI is probably up there. I don't have it calculated right now. If he even is 200 pounds. But when you look at the NFL, I mean, you even look at the running backs, below the 205 mark. I don't think there's been a finisher in the top 24 scoring in the last, whatever years in recent memory. I can't remember one under 205 pounds. And at 5'8", going into his third year, there's a very good chance that he's maxed out his frame already at this point. I don't know if he's going to get any bigger at this point. And he did have a pretty good year for Michigan last year. He totaled over 1,200 scrimmage yards. If you take a deeper look into the stats, there is some that are maybe not as glowing as it seems on the surface. Because he had an ankle injury later in the season that really messed with his playing time. I only looked at the first 8 weeks for this sample. He had 4 games over 100 rushing yards, but in those 4 games, he only faced one defense that was ranked in the top 100 against the rush. And it was the first game of the season against Western Michigan. And now, if on the flip side, you look at his other 4 games where he didn't hit 100 yards, he faced defenses all within the top 100 nationally for rushing, and he averaged less than 3.3 yards per carry in those 4 games. And he only rushed for an average of 62 yards in those games. So he was struggling against some of the better defenses. An injury at the end of the year really allowed a guy that a lot of people like as well, Donovan Edwards, to come on. We already saw him do some versatile things at the end of the season and in the spring game already. So he's a guy that could see a lot more playing time, and he's made a good impression. There's been good buzz about him. So I do expect to see him a lot more this year. He's a guy a lot of people are high on. But yeah, I don't think Corum is a bad player, but to be ranked in the top 15, 20 of running backs in Devy is a hard sell for me, because I just don't think that he has that upside at the next level.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I have been a fan of Corum for a long time. And I'm just looking at my last 2 mock drafts that I'm in. He was taken in the 3rd round.
Yeah, see, so that's high.
That is. I agree. As much as I like him, he's going to be next year's Tyler Batty for me. Mm-hmm. That's who I think he's going to be. He's going to be that guy who's productive, but he's on that borderline. He's too small to really make it. So he's going to be a 3rd down back in the NFL. He's got some pass catching ability, Blake Corum as well. So I agree with you. I think that's a good call. Again, this is a Devy show. We're talking about guys that are going to hit toward dynasty rosters, man. That's the guys that I'm looking for. That's the guys we're talking about today. My second player is going to be Zay Flowers, Boston College wide receiver. 5'10". I know you're a little sad. We did a show on him, Corey. Remember last year?
We did, yeah.
I saw a little bit of improvement, but there's still the things that we saw on the film that I saw that I still didn't see get better for this year. And as a film guy, I got to go with what I see on the film. But nonetheless, he's coming back for his senior year, which is, always a knock. And somebody put out a great stat on Twitter of all of the wide receivers in the last 15 years that, came back their senior year and went back and, tried to make it in the NFL. The odds are it was an unbelievable number that just kind of blew my mind. You have to be super elite. And I'm not sure Zay Flowers is going to be that kind of player. He's been certainly productive. Jurkovic is coming back for his, the quarterback. So he's going to have the guy. It is going to be, again, the Jurkovic and Flowers show at Boston College. And I think, again, just watching his film, we have a YouTube film, a film on this channel. You can go back. Corey and I did it a year and a half ago. And I went back and watched it before I recorded this show. And I kind of saw the same things that I saw. I just think he lacks the, physicality to make it in the NFL for me personally. Right. And the thing is, too, he was, I think, as a freshman, he really dazzled us with his ability to rush the ball. He rushed 27 times as a freshman. And then as a sophomore, he only rushed 11 times. And then last year, he only rushed 7 times. So he's been getting a decreased role in the rushing ability. And I think that's what I got enamored with early on. And I think what a lot of Devy guys liked about Zay Flowers was the fact that he was this dual threat, versatile player that was playing all over the place. And you can see they diminished his role a little bit as the years have gone on. So I think his size is going to be kind of an issue. He's going to have to be super, super physical to make it in the NFL at 5'10", 177 pounds. Let's say he's 180 this time next year, getting ready for the draft. So he's he's definitely a player who can, move and get open and all of that. But I have my concern. And again, this is a sell, not because I just don't really like him as a player, but his value right now in this last mock, he's going in average in the 6th to 8th round. But in this last one, he went in the 5th round in a mock, right? So I think I would be taking a swing with a freshman who's got better size and something like that than going with a senior who's going to go to the NFL. So again, this is a show about, we're trying to get you guys to think about players that you might want to move on and get a player that you like better than Zay Flowers and use his inflated, value right now to improve your roster for maybe another player that you like. So I know he's a fan of yours, but I think he's going to be one of those great college players that has a hard time translating to the NFL personally.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, he's probably an ideal slot option at the next level. There's not a lot of guys who can move like him in the open field. I do think he creates separation well. He does a lot of those things well, but there is a lot of things that we have questions for, the drops, the hands, especially like we were saying on the out routes where he seems to drop almost every out route that comes to him, or he bobbles it or something. I don't know what's going on there. I do think we didn't get a good picture last year because Jerkovic went down in the second game, and then we never really got to see him improve on any of those things. The quarterback play wasn't very good. So I maybe have a little bit more hope for you than you, but at the 5th round, that's a little bit absurd to me to be that high. I mean, this is a guy I'm looking for maybe at the 8th round plus, if anything. So but for my second guy, I'm going to hit the wide receiver as well. It's going to be a guy going into his sophomore year. Back to the Oregon Ducks. I did a buy on the Oregon Ducks. Now I'm doing a sell. I'm going to be talking about a guy by the name of Troy Franklin, who was a freshman last year, 4-star prospect. And, he earned legit playing time as a true freshman. And there was 3 freshmen that went there. He ended up playing the most snaps out of all of them. People are excited about this kid. I mean, I recently wrote up his profile for the Devy guide that's coming out on campus at Canton very soon here. So I spent a lot of time charting his games from 2021. And the first thing that stands out is just how rail thin his frame is. I mean, he looks like a stick out there, and he does get pushed around quite a bit. There's some guys who have done studies, like a guy, Noah Hills, who does a lot of stuff on Twitter and for a lot of websites. Chris Moxley of C2C did some studies too, that the average growth for a prospect is somewhere within a 12 to 14 pounds range during their entire college career. So even with a high projection at 14 pounds, that's still only putting them in the 180 pound range. And at 6'2", it's a very slender build for his size. So I'm immediately worried there. And then you look at his production. He only went over 3 catches and 44 yards in 1 appearance during the season. I know it was his freshman year. He wasn't asked for a big role, but his best game came against like one of the worst pass defenses in college, where he caught 4 catches for 65 yards. Like I said, I saw him struggle against more physical corners. He had some strange moments down the field where he actually struggled to catch the ball. I think in the bowl game especially, there was a pass that pretty much came to him perfect in the end zone, and he just couldn't track it or didn't see it or whatever, and he got open. I mean, I will say this is a pretty damn athletic kid, and you can see it in his suddenness and his movement skills. I'm just not sure there's enough in his profile to warrant the top 20 wide receiver selection that he's routinely getting in Devy drafts right now. If I could, get somebody who is interested in him at that price, I could probably be seeing what I get, maybe taking a shot on one of these bigger freshmen or somebody that I think has a little bit more upside at the next level.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, we each have our own, feelings on these players, whether we watch their film or looking at their analytics and whatever. So I certainly respect that. I don't know. Oregon I don't know. They haven't put a wide receiver in the NFL forever, it seems like. I mean, I don't know, but it seems like a long time. So, and with Bo Nix throwing him the ball, there may not be an opportunity for him to elevate those statistics. All right. So my third sell here is going to be a spicy one, as Corey told me before the show. But I'm going to say it's going to be Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback. I'm going to say is a sell. And as what Corey alluded to earlier was the fact that sometimes players' values get so high that you can cash in and increase your whatever you want to do with your team, right? So hear me out on this, right? My biggest concern with Bryce Young is his size. He is 6 foot, 194 pounds. That is what he weighed in at in Alabama 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago this spring. And if you go and look at the current NFL quarterbacks, okay, there's not one quarterback that's under 200 pounds. All right. I'm looking at Britt's dynasty ranks here on the Devy dashboard. All right. And Patrick Mahomes, 230, Josh Allen, 237, Kyle Murray's 5'10", 207. Okay. Derek Carr, 6'3", 210. Zach Wilson, 6'3", 210, right? So we've got a guy who's barely 6 foot, who's 194 pounds. And I have a real concern that this time next year, this NFL scouts are going to be looking at him. And I'm wondering if he is going to be able to hold up to the pounding of an NFL season. I mean, just given his size alone, right? So therefore, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I've got a roster, let's say I'm in a C2C league and I've got a quarter, like I need an NFL quarterback, you might be able to sell Bryce Young to a team that has a lot of good quality existing NFL quarterbacks. Maybe like, just a lower tiered guy, right? But my concern is that this time, like I said, next year, he is going to be, really looked at from his size, because I think a lot of people thought when he was coming into the college that he was going to be a rushing threat, but he's really not. He had 81 attempts last year for 0 yards. He did rush for 3 TDs, but they were very, very short, right? So I'm asking myself, what is his fantasy ceiling if he's not going to contribute really running on the ground? This is not a guy in at the NFL level who's going to be scampering around the field. I mean, Kyle Murray does that too, but he's 5'10", 210 pounds. I mean, he's got a bigger and thicker frame. And Kyle Murray right now is not a guy that, is a guy that I think some people may be questioning that he may runs too much. He's got to stand inside the pocket and throw the ball, right? But I'm asking myself, like, Bama has produced tight ends, right? Tua, Jalen Hurts played there for a little bit. Obviously, Mac Jones. People are already out on Tua already. I mean, Christ, you think about 3 years ago when Tua was a junior before he had the hip injury. I mean, he was like the QB1, and now people are like, half the dynasty and fantasy community are already out on him. Nobody's like Mac Jones because he can't run the ball. But, Bryce Young has the ability to rush the ball, but he just hasn't been doing it, right? So again, I think for a sell show, you could get a haul for this guy right now. And I don't think his value can go up any higher than it is now. You won the Heisman last year. Corey, do you agree with that? Like, his value can't get any higher than right now?
No, I don't think he's pretty much a quarterback one for everybody right now. I know CJ Stroud is making a push, but regardless, you're taking this guy super high in drafts right now. There's nowhere for him to go. He can't go up any higher than he's going right now. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with the value for sure.
Yeah, so you may not agree with me with the size, but I mean, just look at it. Look at the top 20 quarterbacks. There's not a guy that's less than 210 pounds. I mean, there's a reason for that. I mean, you have to withstand the pounding and of that. So, look, I love the guy's game. I wish he would scramble more. He's got a good arm. He's got all of the traits. It's whether or not he's going to, a team's going to feel comfortable. I mean, right now I'm reading reports about Matt Corral, right? I mean, like this time last year, we were all talking about Corral being a possible one, and there's guys that are out on him because of his size. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be a legitimate question next year. So he is my sell, because I think if you've got a good quarterback room in your NFL roster in a C2C league and you really don't need a running back right now, you have the ability to sell him now and improve other parts of your team. So now, if you don't have any quarterbacks and you have Bryce Young and there's no one else you like better, then maybe you stick with him. But he's a guy that I actually have trade offers, like moving him out in some of my leagues to see what I can get for him. So he is my sell.
Yeah, and I agree with the way that you're thinking about this, because when you've got a guy that's valued that highly, a guy that can't go any higher than he's going, then you got to see what you could get out there, because I mean, you could end up getting a haul, and who knows if his play goes down this year, and then his value goes down, and then you never know. And like you were saying with Alabama quarterbacks, I mean, the track record has been good for draft capital. It hasn't been great in the NFL yet. I mean, these guys are constantly being questioned. You know, Tua's got a bunch of weapons now, so we'll see what happens there if he can go. Mac Jones still gets questioned daily if they're going to stick with him or whatever. I'm sure we'll be hearing, are the Patriots going to draft a quarterback soon enough?
Yeah.
And then even Jalen Hurts, people still have questions about him to see what he's going to do. I know he went to went to Oklahoma too. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, sort of in the same premise, the guy I'm going to go with is a wide receiver who's ranked pretty highly for a lot of people, and that's Oklahoma wide receiver Marvin Mims. And the biggest thing with Mims is his ranking. He's routinely going in the top 15 of Devy wide receiver, somewhere in that range. And I'm just not sure I'm like really willing to take that price. And taking a look at him specifically, he had a pretty good freshman season in 2020 with Rattler under center. He actually had PFF's highest receiving grade in the Big 12, so he had a pretty good freshman season. A lot of people were high on him. That's when he really started climbing. But if you look at that year, he was really only the only option that they had that year. Jadon was coming off the ACL. Weiss was coming off an injury. Their main TE Stogner, who's now transferred out, he was doing well. Then he got injured. Rambo got injured, only played 9 games. So it was a messy group that he kind of climbed out of for his consistency, right? And his stats were really amplified by 3 games where he went over 100 yards last year, and they were all over some of the worst passing defenses in college. In the other 10 games of the season, he only averaged 31 yards per game. I mean, so he was getting a boost from these 3 games, and he did end up as the leading receiver. But I mean, without those 3 games, who knows what we'd be looking at? And the type of player he is at 5'11", 177 pounds. He doesn't bring that quickness or speed that I want from that size, especially if you're that size. You got to have a little bit of something extra. He essentially won making ridiculous catches, being a jump ball specialist, which is weird at his size, but he is good at it. It's something I'm definitely going to give him credit for doing. He actually led his team in contested catches last year, which is, again, kind of crazy. But it's not the first thing you look of or you think of when you hear his size. And really, you have to wonder if that's going to translate to the NFL at his size. I will say, entering 2022, there's going to be a good chance that he's fairly productive as the number 1 guy again. This is the same thing I was talking about with ACHANE earlier. There's a lot of turnover and a new quarterback's coming in and stuff like that, but he's going to be productive, and the best time to sell him might be in season a little bit when he's putting up yards and being the number 1 guy, if you're not a believer in him like myself. At the end of the day, I think that Mims is a solid player. He is a solid player, and he does a lot of things well, who has an NFL future, but I'm just not paying the wide receiver 15 prices that I'm seeing right now, and I'd rather take a shot at bigger upside.
Yeah, you talked about the size. We just, I was talking about Zay Flowers. They're the exact same size, 5'10", 177. So you're right. When you're that size, like Waddle's that size, right? He was 182, I think 5'10". The dude's
but he was special.
He was special, right?
Yeah.
But these smaller, shorter guys, they need to bring something elite to the table to get on an NFL field. So I like the call. So, all right, man. So those are our 6 sells. You feeling good about your selections?
I am, man. You're a little spicy there with the Bryce Young, but I love it. Bringing that heat, man. We gotta be truthful to ourselves, man.
That's it. I've always said that. Go with your guy. Go with your gut. So please leave a comment down below. I'd love to debate with all you guys when you tell me I'm out of my freaking mind. So I have no problem doing that.
Crazy.
So tell them I'm going cuckoo, whatever. So hey, Corey, man, thanks again for jumping on the channel, and I'll see you when we do our sleeper show coming up.